this story of Toys R Us, it closed, or I should say, entered into bankruptcy a couple of months ago. It has been, for a lot of people, a little bit sentimental. This is the biggest toy store across the country. I don't know. Maybe it's the only national toy store chain that this country had. I'm not sure. You'll tell us. But it was around from 1957 to the year 2018. Walk us through what happened to Toys R Us.
Sure. So Toys R Us, yes, the biggest toy store there is, as their jingle goes. It, I think, is currently the only major toy store. There were others at one time or another, but I think they've all also gone out of business. And Toys R Us, as you said, started as a family business in 1957. Even in the past year, sold 1 out of every 5 toys sold in America. So this was
important.
A big operation.
Yeah, and this is important to say too, because I think most people's reaction to hearing that Toys R Us closed down is because, of course, because Amazon or the internet, right? I mean, that right. had to be the primary reason why 33,000 people are losing their job. But that may not be any of the story. Maybe it's some of it, but it's not really the story, is it?
It's a smaller part of the story because despite competition from Walmart, Target, all the big box stores, and Amazon, you had Toys R Us selling a really large chunk of the toy market with annual revenue routinely over $11 billion a year.
Wow.
So why is Toys R Us going out of business? So in 2005, Toys R Us was sold to a consortium of private equity firms. This included KKR, Vornado Realty Trust, and Bain Capital. And we know Bain Capital because that's where Mitt Romney used to work. And we know what these private equity deals do. They, in this case, they bought Toys R Us for $6.6 billion. However, the 3 private equity firms only put $1.3 billion of their own money into it, and the rest they borrowed. And when they borrowed it, the debt became assumed by Toys R Us. So now, in addition to running their business, Toys R Us had to service $5.3 billion in debt every year. The debt payments were something on the order of $500 million a year, and they had to pay out fees, management and advisory fees to the private equity firms. Now, the idea behind private equity...
Now, hold on for a second. We got to stop here, okay? Because this is the part of the story where I think people, they hear about vulture capitalism, they hear about these leverage buyouts, and they don't fully appreciate this dynamic. So I want to walk through this slowly.
Great.
These 3 companies come up with less than... I don't know, 20%.
20%.
20%. 20% of the money. They borrow the other 80%. So there's for instance, that's the way maybe I would go about buying a house. And I think in New York City, you need to have 20% down. I would buy the house.
Right.
But when I borrow this money, I got to pay this money out of, money I presumably earn and whatnot. It's not like... Right. The house is a separate entity from me, and I can start charging the house money for me to live in the house. Because that's basically what they're doing, right? They're saying, okay, we've bought the house. We bought it with borrowed money. We don't owe the money. The house owes the money.
You have to work to pay back the money.
Yeah. And not only that, not only are we going to sort of make this company out of a house, we're going to make it Airbnb. We're gonna take money for operating the Airbnb. I mean, this all sounds like a scam. I mean,
it's all financial engineering. And the idea behind it is that they are very wise and they will turn struggling companies into successful businesses, spin them back out in an IPO, and everyone wins, right? The company gets a better business. The private equity managers profit, and the economy is strengthened by a stronger business. That routinely has not happened in the retail world. There have been about 19 bankruptcies from private equity owned retail firms over the last decade or so. They have cruelly mismanaged these companies, and really management was sort of not the point. The point was to suck out these profits as much as they possibly can so that they win either way. They win if they can spin the company into turn it back public, or they win if the company fails because they've taken all the profits out of it and left the husk by the side of the road. So it's a win-win proposition for the private equity firms, but the workers and the management of the company is in for a huge struggle, because how are they going to pay off this debt service while still operating their business? Well, they're going to cut labor. They're going to cut on efficiency and materials, cut on whatever they can possibly cut on, give worse service to people. And it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that the business, at least in the case of retail recently, ends up not being able to survive.
All right. So, okay, now tell us how these company, Bain and their two partners, how they make their money. They go in, they've got they've sunk $1.3 billion into it.
Right.
Are they the first in line in terms of creditors? So in other words, there's the company owes money to the presumably the banks, right? And maybe they owe money to the distributors who sold them the toys, any inventory they have in there. And once they go into bankruptcy, the company starts selling all the toys. They start maybe selling their real estate leases. Who gets paid first? Is it the $1.3 billion, or is it what's owed on the remaining $5.3 billion?
Well, I guess you shouldn't see Bain Capital and the private equity owners as technically creditors in this situation. They are, equity holders. They technically lose. In the case of the Toys R Us, this liquidation, they technically lose that investment of $1.3 billion. However, all along the way, they've been taking management and advisory fees, which come up to $470 million. So you got to offset that. The second thing is that the way private equity firms manage, the way they have the capital, the $1.3 billion in the first place, is from investors of theirs. So they don't really they're putting their money on the line, but it's not their money, it's their investors' money. Now, do the investors get back do they get that $470 million as an offset? Not really. They might get a small dividend here and there, but that really goes into the firm. And so it's hard to do the math here. It's very complex, but those analysts that have really find that both Bain Capital and KKR made at least a $15 million profit over the life of Toys R Us, which is, a failure.
But they still get paid.
And they still win.
All right. Well, Dave, we got to take a break. I want to talk a little bit more about this, because I think, the way that those of us who are not involved in finance conceive of these things is that in many respects, we don't realize that these outfits, Bain, KKR, Vornado, there's just people in there who are just looking out for their own bottom line. So if they can walk away with $15 million as one of their projects, that's a great day for them, even though obviously it's shattered the lives of literally thousands of people. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with David Dayen after this.